So,
Okay, cool.
So we're here with Dean Taylor, and we're going to be talking for around about 30-40 minutes. So anybody watching this, just settle in, grab a drink, and we're going to be talking about our connection, which is predominantly Biomechanics Coaching. However, what I would like Dean to do first of all, do you mind introducing yourself, your professional background, because I know you do several things that don't necessarily cross over, but anything you'd like to share. Who are you? What do you do?
Thanks, Rachel. I'm Dean Taylor. I'm a chartered physiotherapist, graduated from Pinderfields in 1993. So the journey started there in the very late 80s, working in the NHS. I now work as a bike fitter. I use Retool. I'm one of their master fitters. And I'm also what's the title, Rach? A master trainer of biomechanics? There we go. Also working with the biomechanics coaches.
And it is really to have something that I've always advocated with our education program, the Academy, is the ability for us to deliver this training into so many different professional skill sets. And so what I'm really interested in, Dean, from your perspective as a chartered physio, the Biomechanics Coaching Diploma model was designed by a chartered physio who was somewhat dissatisfied with a certain level of that style of training, in terms of if you've got a shoulder problem, you assess and treat the shoulder, when the body's an integrated system. And he was finding, so he evolved, if you like, that some of his physio training and other training to create the Biomechanics Coach Diploma. So for you to have come from that actual background, for me, it was brand new, because it was all about assessments, which we don't learn in the exercise world in the same way you do. What was the experience like for you as a physio, kind of learning, physio, it was not physiotherapy, I've got to be careful of the way I describe it, coming into an evolution from maybe a clinical practice into the exercise world? How did you find that, and how was that transition?
It was surprising. I went on the first course, which I think was the pelvis, and it was far better than I expected it to be. And it wasn't until in fact, I think I probably completed all of the modules, when I then met Martin, who you mentioned. And then it all fell into place, because Martin and I, unbeknown to me going on the course, were born and grew up. Oh no. Sorry.
On my end, don't panic.
That was me. That was my mum calling. I just put my mum to answer phone. I feel really bad now. Yeah. Oh no. Sorry. Yeah, we lived about 500 yards away from each other. Martin was a few years advanced of me. And then we went to the same junior school, the same primary school, the same secondary school, and also Pinderfields College of Physiotherapy. And that all then made sense, because my year was the last year to get the old-fashioned teaching of the vocational type course, but we were given a degree for it. So we were very, very lucky in the crossover period. And that all made sense, because a lot of the frustration that Martin has got out with creating this with you I guess I had a similar level of frustration because of the way I was taught. And then looking at things that were overly compartmentalized just never made sense. And that was very, very handy with the language that you guys use, helped me explain better to the cyclists I see what's going on, and also to their PTs. So it kind of all just brought it together, which was really useful. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. And I find it really interesting when we get different professionals come through it and how they receive the information, because ultimately what Martin was trying to do when he designed it was to enable more people to access the system that he tried and he felt worked really well across all platforms. So from the exercise world, who don't have clinical training to deal with people's movement quality, up to the clinicians to have an exercise and system-based process to assessing and treating. But then it gives us this ability to communicate better, which is what I find really exciting. And you mentioned that in terms of the language, because generally exercise professionals don't have the memory recall of our old anatomy language, because we never use it. We never use varus pectoneus in a PT session. You know, we don't talk about the anatomy in the way you obviously study at degree level, which is quite different again to our education. And so it's enabling us to communicate, and you and I to have this conversation, I guess. What are you, so right now do you practice as a physio right now?
No.
No, right,
No.
okay. And so when you did your physiotherapy, your chartered physiotherapy training, how many years did you practice, and then how did you transition into the bike fitting?
It would have been about a decade of practice, and then I'd already sold my clinic and was doing other stuff, and I was doing a lot of cycling. And the guys that I cycle with, because of the area we live in, it's a commuter to London, and a lot of them work in the be careful what I say, because people will be watching this. A lot of them work in the financial markets,
Right.
and the way they ask questions is possibly a little bit more assertive than other people. And my best friend, who I was cycling with, who I've known for over 20 years, always introduced me as a physio rather than what I was doing, because he always thought that the physio was better than what I was doing, and I should be doing physio. And the questions I got from them was along the lines of, well, you think you're a physio, why is this not comfortable? Why is that not comfortable? And any insight into, oh, there's something I could do there that wasn't all-encompassing treating people as physio would do, but also looking at the bike fitting. And that led to 2011, when we set up Fit Me Up here in Hartford.
So, because I'm intrigued that, you know, you talk about perception of physio, because I hear what you're saying, and I think there is, even next to maybe chiropractics and osteopaths, why do you think there is this maybe perception of hierarchy, with the physios maybe being at the top of the tree, and then, you know, it comes down and down and down, and then personal trainers down the bottom? Do you think that's education? Do you think that's something that happened politically, or what do you feel? Do you feel that's, I mean, you've just mentioned it there, that there's this idea that physios are the ones at the top, kind of at the top of the tree. Is that what you mean? Because that's how I kind of sense sometimes people see the professionals.
I think that's how some professionals would like to be seen. Hopefully, when we talk and when we met, that isn't what I put out. Because if it is, I'm very sorry, because that's not how I see it.
No, not at all.
I think it's possibly, oh, good, thank you. I wasn't fishing, I was just hoping that was the truth. I think because of the structure with physios working with surgeons, in particular in this environment with sports, because with health and fitness, it's generally orthopedics, so there's generally linking with surgeons. And it's almost, I don't know if it's still the case, because I don't work as much with other professionals now, but when I did my cranial osteopathy course, it was very much oh, you're a physio. What are you doing here? Why do you want to do this? This isn't the same. It's not the science, the proven. It's a little bit more, if you like, out there. But it's what works for different people. There are some therapists that work locally who I very happily go and see, and the way they deal with me, the way that they help me get over ailments are much better than other people with a different title that I've been to see, that I've not really enjoyed the process, and I've not really felt like I've got what I needed coming out the other end. And I think it's a level playing field, in that I don't do exercise prescription. I'll happily set up a program for myself, and I'll go through the progressions, and I'll go through what I need to go through. but that's not really my thing. So if I'm training for something specific, let's say a big cycling event, I might then go and see a cycling coach who will take away that part of it for me and give it to me. Whereas if I'm hurt, I'll go and see a remedial therapist or a physio. So I think that there needs to be a greater explaining of, we all have a part to play, and maybe with the things that you're doing with the governing bodies, we can hopefully get to a point where everyone is perceiving themselves as equal, and focusing on what they're doing rather than what other people are doing, and then sharing ideas. Unfortunately, I think with private practice and businesses being involved, there's very much a feeling of, well, if I tell you my secrets as to what I'm doing, then you'll be able to do it, and I might not get as much business. And on the back of that, I think, Martin and I have been chatting, we're going to use some of the stuff from Biomechanics and do a research project just to show how simply things can be identified, and then work through from there. But I think it's possibly to do with historical with the health service and physiotherapy being chartered and having this title, because physio is not a protected title. Anyone can be a physio. It's just the chartered bit.
Yeah. And I think, and I'll just put the caveat in there, by the way, you're one of the most humble and modest physios. You come in the category of Martin. And I find that the physiotherapists that do, and osteopaths that come through, and chiropractics actually, that come through the Biomechanics Coach diploma, are more often than not the most modern thinking and open-minded. I'm just interested on the views of outsiders, the public, and the perception of a physiotherapist, which I think is, as you say, historical, but something that Martin's always talked about, and that in my experience, and it sounds like yours, is to help clients, customers, people, professionals even, be more aware of it's the individual that will deliver quality rather than the actual professional training. You can be a really poor physio, but be a phenomenal personal trainer who maybe demonstrates a different level of duty of care, and so you actually feel more better served by somebody perceived as less educated, but with a more open-minded, diplomatic, primarily duty of care, rather than, as you say, that commercial aspect. I think
you're right. When I worked in corporate fitness, again, many moons ago, we had a physio in a lot of the locations, and a whole bunch of personal trainers. I can't remember what the question was.
If you can just repeat that again, Dean, because we just cut out a little bit there.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. I think it was, where were we? Oh yeah, corporate fitness. There were lots of personal trainers who all had a degree, all had a Bachelor of Science, but because there were so many of them around, their currency was almost seen as less and less important. Yeah. But it would seem going forwards, I tend to look at what I do now as a bike fitter, being more like a GP, in that when somebody comes in and they have various goals they want to achieve, and one of them might be getting out of pain, one of them might be wanting to get stronger or do more, my role is more important in identifying any issues that I can see, and then helping them find the people that will help them. Because I tend to have a 3-hour session, which is pretty intense with people, but then having other professionals around, I've passed off, that sounds awful. I've helped clients meet people like Tracy, who has gone through a process and had great success. And I think it's just helpful knowing who can help rather than trying to retain everything, which is one of the reasons I don't practice, because a lot of people that I see would benefit from some form of treatment. But if you come and see me and I say, oh, and by the way, you need a new saddle, you could do some new shoes and some treatment. It's almost like when you go and purchase a suit or a new dress for a do. I walk out with a couple of new shirts, some cufflinks and some shoes, and all I wanted was a suit. And it's the same, you might get earrings and all the other bits and pieces that ladies go and wear, and you think, well, what's happened? So I think it's just being able to refer on and having that confidence, and the standards that you guys have set mean that if I'm referring somebody on to a qualified coach, I know what I'm getting, rather than it being something that was done in half an hour over the internet. If that helps.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about let's just do what we do really well and not try and do everything. You can have, I like to learn about other professions. I've done a sports massage course. I don't use it, but the knowledge has helped me know when I need to refer somebody for manual therapy, for example, working with you and Martin and Mike. So I think you're absolutely right in that. Having a team around you, A, builds your confidence, B, it makes you look more professional when you are referring away, because it takes a confident professional to refer their client away, but it allows you to just focus on what you really enjoy, which is what I want to talk about next, which is your bike fitting, which is what you now classify yourself professionally as, more than, as you say, as a practicing physio. So tell us about your bike fitting. How does that look? And maybe are you bike fitting during lockdown? Have you completely shut down, or how are you managing it right now?
Well, I am completely shut down, which is frustrating, because there's very little that I can do. The process is very hands-on. I use some of the screens that we use on Biomechanics Coaching to look at clients before the bike, and once they're on the bike, we're in a closed situation. They'll be breathing pretty heavily and working quite hard for some of them, and then I need to be making adjustments to their bicycle, so it's a little bit close and invasive, and doing it via something like this would be quite difficult and possibly frustrating for the person on the other end, because if I'm saying, oh, can you just move your saddle, or can you just do this, the tools might not be available, it might be difficult, and I think it's better, rather than doing something badly out of some form of desperation, I'd rather just wait. And I've been able to help a few people with phone calls, and they've sent me in photos of their bike, and I've said, well, that just doesn't look right. And then I've had some nice feedback from that. So it's been a period of time where it's been a bit frustrating, but it's been nice to help people just for the sake of helping. And then there's always time extra to being able to read through some things, talk to people that I wouldn't necessarily normally be able to find the time to do. So it's not been all bad, and we're both sitting there healthy and well. So that's, got to be thankful for that, really.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a shame, really, because it's one of the things that people can actually do right now is ride bikes. But what's your bike fit company called? Just what's the website for bike fitting? It's
Fit Me Up with hyphens between each of the words. So www.fit-me-up.com.
Brilliant. So I can add it in. So the other thing I want to ask you is about, right now we're in lockdown, which is why I have the luxury of being able to do this and spend a bit of time with you online, which is great. However, there is kind of it's now falling into a period of time where everyone's starting to be able to think mid and long term. For you as a bike fitter, and in your kind of area of expertise, do you feel like the lockdown and the COVID and everything else that's going on, and then commercially what's happening, is that going to be a long-term effect? Like if we went 2 to 5, maybe 10 years from now, how do you think your industry is going to look in the future? Will it look the same? Will it get back to it? Do you predict complete change, a bit of a change, or no idea?
Being completely honest, I've probably got no idea.
Right.
I would imagine, if I was to project on what I think might happen, I think it will contract a little bit. And hopefully the people that are then left unable to continue will be able to focus on their own education. Like I've been able to go and listen to people. I've been able to listen to shoe manufacturers talking about why they use certain materials to make their shoes, as an example, which I'd never normally have the time to. I learned what tanning is. I learned things that are genuinely interesting and why I would choose a certain material, so I can then talk to clients about it. I think the downside with bike fitting is it's become quite heavily technology intensive, because it's nice to use technology and it's nice to be able to show people what works and how it's happening. The downside of that is because it is still quite a small industry, the technology is very bespoke and very expensive. So the unfortunate side is if we haven't got a throughput of people coming through the door, it's difficult to pay for that technology, particularly if money's been leveraged in order to buy that. So I think that's a potential problem for a lot of companies going forwards. I think it would be nice if we all come together and help each other, and work forwards to help with the education, which again we're looking at doing, so that when people look and find a bike fitter in their area, they know what they're getting. A lot of people like to say what they do and talk about how very good they are and their results, which is great and it's useful, but I'm not always sure. I've had to learn the hard way, I suppose, when I was working in private practice, in a busy practice, of learning my limitations and when to walk away and when, oh, actually, that looks a bit unusual. I'm not sure. And that's one of the hardest things I have to say to clients or to patients in the past, when honestly, I don't know. And it is very humbling when someone comes in and they give up their time and money to see you. And it would be lovely to have a network of support where it's easy to say, I don't know, but I will find out for you. Perhaps if we can rearrange. So maybe as the industry contracts, we'll become closer and be able to help each other more.
Yeah. And I think it kind of, that transitions us into talking about education, which is our now continued sort of relationship, is in you being one of the Biomechanics Coaching master trainers. And I know you and Martin, as you say, are in discussions to put together some cycling biomechanics education. And I know it's still being kind of developed and researched and so on, because you're both quite determined to make sure you're presenting evidence-based education. Who is it aimed at? Do you know that yet? I know you're heavily involved with bike fitting, the cycling world. Is that for other bike fitters? Is that for just cyclists? Or is it both? Or don't you know yet? Where are you able to share any insight into the education you're putting together and who it's going to be for and when you're going to be delivering it, maybe?
I think so. Hopefully, I think the delivery will be based on when we're allowed to, because I think it's something that would be much better face-to-face and in small groups rather than via the internet. I think the target group we'll be talking to will be fitness professionals, coaches, because of the language. It will be a common language, and then hopefully via an intermediate process, bike fitters. Some bike fitters are absolutely brilliant. I've watched them do things and I've learned from them, and then they know what works because it works, and they're much better with a set of spanners than me. But our background is talking about, as you mentioned earlier, anatomy and where certain muscles run from and to, and that knowledge isn't always there. Now, it's not a problem if it isn't there, because it doesn't make them any lesser, and they maybe achieve better results than I do. But in terms of being able to communicate, we need to get that across that language barrier first. Otherwise, it would be unfair to be trying to push it. And it would almost be, as we spoke about earlier, seen as another way of talking down to certain people because they don't have the language. So initially with coaches, just really trying to make it as broad and easily accessible as possible.
So in terms of fitness professionals who have a knowledge of exercise, movement and anatomy, who might be coaching cyclists to understand their cycle biomechanics, if you like, and help them move better. But then down the line, I know what you wanted to do, I know we spoke about in the past, some sort of anatomy training to enable a bike fitter who may be watching this right now to upgrade their anatomy knowledge so that their vocabulary is of a level to be able to communicate with peers, clients, professionals.
Just to push everything up a little bit, because there's very much I'm aware of, because of where I come from, my language and the way I talk when I relax might make me sound not as clever as someone who speaks better. And that's silly, but it's something I'm aware of. And just because the exacts aren't known doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. So hopefully we can work together and make or help other professionals realize that people are good just because they don't have that particular title, which would be really, really useful.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and I'm quite intrigued to know, like, I'm trying to imagine all the people that might be watching this video, and you've got an exercise professional and a physiotherapist, and both of us have that sort of anxiety about, anxiety may not be the right word, about our vocabulary skills, and yet, people might perceive us as being at the other end of the scale in terms of this hierarchy. So I always find it really exciting to be able to openly say to people, I'm not the best at everything else. It's okay to say you don't know. And it's really refreshing to hear that coming from you as the physio who gets perceived, on another level as well, which is why I really wanted to bring you on and talk to you, because I know you're extremely humble. You are extremely knowledgeable as well, but it's just great for others to watch this and understand we're all human, we're all trying to achieve the same thing, which is help people. Okay, so I'm aware of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to share with anybody watching this a book or Audible recommendation, or what are you, a book nerd or an Audible geek, or neither?
Up until two and a bit years ago, Audible or Kindle would be bad words. I love books. I've collected books all through my adult life, and my wife bought me a subscription for Audible about two and a bit years ago, and ever since then I've been hooked. Non-industry related, I really like autobiographies. Burt Reynolds' autobiography is one of the best I've listened to. Something more English. So David Attenborough's autobiography is amazing. He used to plan by sending a telegram and plan for 3 months and then travel for several weeks to get to somewhere, not knowing if the people were even expecting him or if there was anyone going to be there that spoke the same language, which for all of us in our age group and younger, that's just a bizarre thing to do. In terms of a print book, any good anatomy book. We used a book at college, which I have still downstairs in my office, by Palestanga, and just anatomy. It doesn't really change very much, apart from the 5th quadricep. Which does that mean that will change to a quintricep now? Set of muscles. Learning anatomy From my first lecture at college, it's just become a passion. It's the most interesting thing in the body for me that I can understand, because I can't understand pharmacology. It's far too detailed and way beyond my level of expertise. But yeah, any good anatomy book.
And I think that that resonates with me as well, which is why I like to, when I hear something like the fifth quad and then the sixth one, of course, isn't there? So yeah. I've got a blog ready to go with the fifth and sixth one in. But I mean, from the perspective of, for you as a chartered physiotherapist, I'm sure you will have had, correct me if I'm wrong, the experience of some kind of cadaver experience or dissection. Would you have done that in your training? Yeah.
Yeah, we were very lucky. We went over to Leeds University, which was great.
Whereas movement professionals don't have that luxury, and yet when you do that, that was one of the biggest learning curves for me, whereby I had a very low confidence about my level of anatomy knowledge, learning from a 2D book. And then I went to a cadaver lab and saw fifth quads, triple-headed biceps, the differences inside bodies, and I thought, hang on a minute. I've been learning from a book and the book's wrong.
Yeah.
And it was that moment for me that was just so, it lifted a weight off my shoulders. Actually, I don't need to know it all. Even the books are generic. And then, you know, because you're training at level 2, level 3, this is how we move, this is where the quads go, it's very, very, and it has to be like that in the beginning. That's the layered learning idea, isn't it? And then I go and explore it at level 4, whatever levels you call it, or just in more depth. And obviously yourself, through chartered physiotherapy degree and looking at different bodies, and you realise we're all very different. So I'm just agreeing with you, I think. Is there a specific book, you say all anatomy books, is that one your favourite one, the one you went to? What's the name of that book you just mentioned?
I don't know. I'll have to.
Is there
I'll have to go and look.
You know, is there a kind of one that stands out? I mean, one of my favourites is Gray's Anatomy.
I like that. It's just so detailed.
Yeah.
I'm a typical male and too much detail, and I struggle. There are instructions. Obviously, I wouldn't possibly read them. Yeah. Functional anatomy books are useful. There's one I have downstairs, Hollins Head's Functional Anatomy. It's a nice small book. It's a few hundred pages, not too much. And what I really like about that is, as well as describing each muscle in simple terms, it talks about where they run from and to and how they create the movement. One of the things that I find, again, very, very interesting is when I meet people who are well-trained bodybuilders, and they may be a little bit uncertain as to their level of expertise when working with clients, but what they've created is amazing. And when you just chat and listen to them about, okay, so how did you make that part of your body that size? Well, I did this. And then you see the look back from them that they're facing, oh yeah, I do know a lot more than I think I do. And I think with your course, it helps bring that out and bring it through, in that just because somebody knows a little bit more, they've read a few more books, doesn't necessarily mean they're any better. It's just a difference. But yeah, Hollins Head's Functional Anatomy is one that I refer back to because it's super simple. And it also puts in the innervation of the muscles, which can be helpful when possible red flags, which I know that you've been looking at as well with other things.
Yeah, and I agree completely with the idea of simplification, which is, as you know, I do all the time, because working with Martin for so many years, and him being a chartered physio, and he was the same. If it doesn't work in application, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you've got, how many qualifications you've got. If you can't help someone move better, the knowledge is useless. And yet you can be a level 2 fitness instructor and be really helpful and a great coach. So it's far more, isn't it, than the academia that I think people perceive as the best bit of it. It's helpful, of course, but I totally agree. Okay, so I'm going to start to bring it to a close. where can people find you? Obviously you're in lockdown right now, but if people are watching this and they're like, do you know what, I'd like to have a chat with Dean, so you've got www.fit-me-up.com.
Yep.
Is there anywhere else? Are you on social media, or do you not do that?
Yeah, we're on Facebook. Fit Me Up. I think it's Fit Me Up Bike Fitting, but Fit Me Up, and we're based in Hertford, right in the centre of Hertfordshire. By all means, contact me via the website. There's a contact form, there's a phone number. You're happy for me to put a phone number out here? Yeah. That's 01992 507 901. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. I'm very happy to help and help us all through this period when things can be a little bit frustrating, particularly when the weather's so good and there is the opportunity to get out, which it isn't always in England, nice and comfortable.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Dean. And I have to say, I'm really excited that you are part of the Master Trainer team and working with Martin. So anybody out there, definitely watch this space on the biomechanics.com website, because the Cycle Biomechanics workshop will be coming soon and they're putting it all together. And hopefully, not long after we come out of lockdown, maybe it'll be ready.
I would hope so. I think it'll probably be ready before we're able to deliver it, is the aim, so that we can practice it and polish it a little bit before it's presented out to the wider world.
I'm sure you'll get loads of volunteers for the practice run, I'm sure.
Yeah, which would be good. That would be great.
Dean, this has been amazing. It's been an honour. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of time with me, and I look forward to seeing you soon when we get to the other side.
Thanks for the opportunity, Rachel. Take care. Thanks.